How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Monday, October 7th, and what a day of football we had yesterday, right? If you stayed up the entirety of all the games, you would have saw from 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time here where I live, all the way through 1 a.m. the following day, a whole day, pretty much into the next day of football. And there was a lot to talk about. There's a lot to cover on today's show, just going over through some of the biggest matchups while also previewing tonight's game as well. We're not completely through week 5, so we're going to preview that later on in the show. But we're going to talk about Sunday Night Football, the Ravens win over the Bengals, the Houston and Buffalo game as well, plus some more stories on today's show. So make sure to stick around and tune into that. But before we get started, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make during the show, please make sure to use the new Super Chat feature just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. If you guys have any questions, comments, anything you'd want to say on any of the topics or anything related to yesterday's games as well, don't hesitate. Drop it in the chat box just by using the Super Chat feature as well. We appreciate you guys using that, and it's a big help for us here at the network, so go ahead and use that and be part of the show. I always love it when you guys are part and asking me questions and whatnot. So we got now the first topic on today's agenda, talking about the Sunday Night Football game we had last night. It was a battle of wills, pretty much. Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys outlasted the Steelers last night and got a 20-17 win over Pittsburgh. Pretty back and forth the entirety of the game. After about an hour and a half weather delay, of course, Dallas improved to 3-2, while Pittsburgh suffered back-to-back losses to go to also 3-2, now dropping below the Ravens in the race for the AFC North. So costly loss for the Steelers, but a massive win for Dallas and for Dak Prescott. Because if you look at the stats coming from this game and how the players performed on the night, you look at Dak Prescott, 29 for 42 for over 350 yards. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a fumble as well. Rico Dowdle undoubtedly having his best game of his season, 20 carries for 87 rushing yards, and Jalen Tolbert, another guy that stood out from the Dallas Cowboys, 7 receptions for 87 yards and 1 touchdown as well. And the Cowboys players, some of the guys like you guys might not even know of, Rico Dowdle and Jalen Tolbert, stepped up to the challenge where they were needed in situations where CeeDee Lamb was double covered or anything like that, and Dak needed somebody to throw the ball to. These guys came up time and time again, and also Kevontae Turpin. He was becoming a real problem for the Steelers last night, so all those guys stepped up. Whereas for the Steelers, Justin Fields, compared to last week, a pretty pedestrian day, 15 for 27 for 131 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. Najee Harris, another lackluster performance, 14 carries for 42 yards for a running game that hasn't been as dominant or really consistent as people would have thought. And also the passing game, if I'm saying Najee Harris' contributions in the running game aren't really there, the passing game is even less than that, because Najee Harris had the most receiving yards out of anybody with 35, leading all wide receivers in that. And we had Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, and Van Jefferson near the top of the stat sheet with 3 receptions. And you have 3 guys having 3 receptions, and none of those wide receivers had as many receiving yards as Najee did. And I think that pretty much sums it up there for the Steelers, passing problems that they have. But we're going to talk about that in just a second. But we're going to talk about the game and what kind of happened throughout the contest, because in the first half, it consisted of not too much action if you were looking for offense, which if you were looking for offense in this game, you probably haven't watched a lot of the Steelers or the Cowboys that much this year. But like I said, the first half consisted of 4 punts, 3 field goals, an interception, a fumble lost by Dallas. But even still, throughout all of that, they were leading 6-3 going into the half. And Pittsburgh's offense off of that point really didn't get going until the second half, where in their first drive, they kicked off that second half with a touchdown to Connor Hayward to take the lead 10-6. And for as concerning as I was with Pittsburgh's defense, allowing Rico Dowdle and guys like Jalen Tolbert and Kevontae Turpin to kind of have their best performances of the year, the Steelers defense did come up with 3 turnovers, right? They intercepted Dak in the red zone. That was more his fault. That was a really weird and just bad throw to Dante Jackson, and then the fumble. Again, I mean, you got to be more aware, obviously, of, I guess, TJ not holding the ball for that long, but, that's just a great player on the other side. TJ Watt getting his 100th stack, so not too much on him. And then the last one, he's just taking a shot, and Joey Porter Jr. makes a great play on it. And throughout all of that, again, the Cowboys never felt like they were really out of this game, which is a problem for the defense, not being able to stop them, but for also the offense, because you never really felt confident that the Steelers, pass game, running game, anything was going to get going. It just looked like a real struggle to produce anything from that point. And then after that, for as much as I praise the Steelers for getting those turnovers, they also had a couple mistakes with the first touchdown to Rico Dowdle where Deshaun Elliott falls, and there was just too many miscommunication errors where Minkah Fitzpatrick might call a play, and not everybody knows the player, not everybody knows where they're supposed to be, a lot of blown coverages, a lot of guys just not knowing who they're supposed to cover, and there was a lot of plays last night where the Cowboys players were, I think there was like a 10-yard radius or something like that where they made catches in very open, fields of play, which is not a good sign, obviously. But still, the game remained close. The Steelers' defense held on as much as possible. But it was until that ending part of the game, obviously, where the Steelers go down. They score another touchdown after a unnecessary roughness on George Pickens, and Justin Fields throws a little shovel pass to Pat Freiermuth. They take the lead 17-13 with about, I think, 5 minutes left, a little bit under that. And, credit to Dallas for putting together the drive. But again, for as much as I praise the Steelers for kind of holding on with their defense, they always talk about wanting to be in those situations where the defense is the one relied upon, and they just couldn't get a stop. TJ couldn't get home. The coverages, again, weren't really the tightest, if you would say, and it did come down to a 4th down play, and that was an amazing play also by Orlando Roberts to force the fumble on Rico Dowdle. Luckily for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott was there. That was still a tremendous play, but it came down to a 4th and goal, and the pressure didn't really get there. Those situations you miss Nick Herbig, who was out of the game, Alex Highsmith, obviously, who is your original starter. You miss those guys, right? Because Dak won't have as much time to find potentially Jalen Tolbert going across the middle if he has Highsmith or Nick Herbig in his face. But because the protection was able to stand, and Deshaun Elliott kind of got caught a little bit behind Jalen Tolbert, not getting over the top of him, then you get that touchdown. Great catch, great throw still. But, overall, my thoughts from this game, it was more so the Steelers' defense. The biggest thing about them just not getting off the field on 3rd downs. That's back-to-back weeks now where they allowed, I think, almost over 50% conversion rate on 3rd down. And while that's not good, you look at the other side, and their offense just isn't converting on 3rd down either. They might have converted at most 3 out of probably like 9 or 10 that they had last night. So those two obviously don't mix, right? You can't have one be very bad on defense and then the other one be abysmal on offense as well. To kind of keep it close, you're going to have one of them be very good, and the Steelers have failed to do that in back-to-back weeks now. And if you don't get the offensive performance from Justin Fields and this offense just in general like you did in the Colts game, you get disappointing results like this, right? It never felt to me like the Steelers were in total control. The Cowboys were missing chances, with the turnovers and things like that. But it's not often where your defense creates 3 turnovers and you still win, or you still lose, I guess, in that sense for the Steelers. But, the Steelers, it's funny because they said all week how they were trying to start faster, and this game might have been the worst one that I've seen them, try and get things going faster, right? Ironic how they said that, and it was their worst performance, right? For a team that is very limited at wide receiver, and that really is a major problem. For George Pickens to have 3 receptions on 7 targets just can't happen. There are some footages of maybe him not running the most effortful route or something like that. It might need some work, but still, you got to find ways to get him the ball any way you can. Screens, things like that, out routes. I was waiting all night to see him just run a quick out route for them to just throw it to him because it seemed like he hadn't touched the ball since the first quarter, but that never came until like the final 7 minutes of the game in the fourth quarter. And also off of that, you can say what you want about the run game a lot, but it's just not working consistently because the offensive line just really hasn't meshed up until this point, and it might still be considered early, but there's too many missed assignments, not enough people getting to their blocking assignments. I saw a couple plays where the Dallas defenders just got to the runner before an offensive lineman even touched them, and that just can't happen. Those are missed opportunities there. Also, the biggest thing that's going to come out of this is going to be the quarterback, right? 2 back-to-back losses where Justin played very good in the one game, and then this game he sort of drops off. But to me, it's not the problem. He's far from it, honestly. He's the easy solution for a lot of people when the game goes wrong or the losses are there. It's easy, Justin, you're out. Let's bring Russ in, right? But that's just an easy cop-out to me. I think the problems are a lot deeper than that. You look at the lack of receivers. There was a lot of plays to be made there, from George dropping wide open passes, Van Jefferson dropping a great pass from Justin Fields on the back shoulder. When your offense is limited already and it looks like you're kind of churning butter out there, like you can't get anything going, you need those plays to happen, right? If he makes a great throw like that, it can't hit you in the hands and then you drop it. That's honestly the truth. And Russ getting in there, quite honestly, isn't going to help these guys get open and isn't going to help the offensive line block any better. It might even be worse, and the sack numbers might start to pile up if Russ can't escape out of there like Justin Fields. So, there's no surprise that Pittsburgh's still looking to trade for a wide receiver, obviously, and I think they're going to need to go out and get one desperately if they want this to look a bit smoother going forward, because none of the receivers really can get open in short space distance. Like George is a good receiver, right, obviously, but the quick lateral, just trying to get open, route running technician kind of receiver, I don't think that's really him. You need a guy like that, and it's ironic that they got rid of that guy in Deontay Johnson. I'm not saying they should regret it or anything like that, but because I think Dante Jackson adds a lot, but still, they just need another guy. You need to go out and trade for someone. There's a lot of guys on the trade rumor, reportedly, so we're actually going to get to that later on in the episode, but still, Dallas gets a massive win. As much as I critique the Steelers, it's a huge win. However Dallas got it, I always want to say that a win is a win, so that was a big win for Dallas. Considering their schedule coming up, they're going to need to be 3-2 now, because I don't see too many wins coming for them later on, and plus it adds to their injury list with Marshawn Nealon getting hurt, their left tackle Jalen Guyton getting hurt. The Dallas Cowboys can't catch a break, but they certainly did get the win last night, so that is a positive for them. But we're going to move on to talking about some more games. Honestly, one of the most entertaining ones, arguably, was the Ravens and the Bengals. A great overtime game, a lot of offense in that game in contrast to this one. So we're going to talk about it, break down the great performances by Lamar and Joe Burrow, plus some more coming up right after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss one of the more entertaining games of Week 5 thus far. That being, as you guys saw there on your screen, the Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. The first AFC North contest so far of the early season did not disappoint at all. This matchup between the Ravens and the Bengals, we kind of hyped it up last week when we previewed it a little bit, just because of the implications of both, scenarios if either team lost, obviously, and Baltimore took advantage, I thought, of some crucial errors by the Bengals in this game to win 41-38 in overtime. Now, the Ravens, like I mentioned before in the last segment, are first in the AFC North with a 3-2 record, and the Bengals in the AFC North as well obviously fall to 1-4, along with the Cleveland Browns in last place after this contest. And looking at both of the performances, I think to me, none two stand out more than these two guys, right? Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. Lamar, an outstanding game. It had pretty much everything. He was making the throws, running with the ball, obviously, how he complimented Derrick Henry, and as well, just making the crazy wow throws, right? You're going to see it everywhere for the next couple of days. The touchdown that he had to Isaiah Likely, it was insane, quite honestly. When you hear everybody talk about how quarterbacks should never do what Lamar did, basically in that scenario, and for him to execute it perfectly and create a touchdown out of it, in which they needed to, it was insane. It was great to see Lamar Jackson perform like that. 348 yards, 4 touchdowns on 26 of 42. He also added on 55 rushing yards. Then you look at all the other players on the Ravens. Derrick Henry, 15 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown. Zay Flowers had a good game, 7 receptions for 111 yards. And you had other guys step up like Kohler, Bateman, and Isaiah Likely, all scored touchdowns as well. Isaiah Likely actually scored 2. So a lot of offense in this game, obviously, right? And then you look at the other side, and Joe Burrow right there, if not a little bit just based on the numbers, outperforming Lamar Jackson with a 30 for 39 day, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an interception as well. You look at his receivers, the epitome of what we thought we'd get out of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Jamar Chase, 10 receptions, 193 yards and 2 touchdowns, while T. Higgins, 9 receptions, 83 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. Crazy numbers in this game, Madden-like numbers in this game. Unfortunately, I couldn't catch the entirety of it. I had to go back and watch the bigger parts of this game. And you look at some of the moments that transpired in this game. Obviously, you look at in that first half, the action was all over the place right from the start for both offenses. Cincinnati were actually leading at the half, 17-14. And there wasn't too much contribution from the running game. I didn't include too much of that, other than Derrick Henry, obviously, because he had big moments. But there wasn't too much from the running game, from Zach Moss or Chase Brown, really that much, because the passing game was just off the charts with both of these guys. They were as close to perfect, right? Neither of the guys were giving up anything, right? They were hitting on every throw. They were making every play. What was going to give for there to be any sort of difference in this game that one team or the other could take advantage of? And then we got to the second half, right? And there were 6 touchdowns just in the second half, back and forth right from the start of the half. It was Bengals score, Ravens, Bengals, Ravens. It was great. It was great to see. And while Cincinnati at one point, I think they were leading by 3 points. Yeah, they were leading 38-35. They were on their drive to try and ice the game there towards the end. And, Joe Burrow making one of the crucial mistakes, I think, of this game, throws that interception to Marlon Humphrey, trying to get it to Jamar Chase. It was a slant route, I believe, and I think Marlon just kind of jumped it, stepped in front of it. And, that was the moment. That was the moment where, maybe you think you overdid it. Maybe you think you threw one to 2 passes more than you should have, and maybe you try to run out the clock in that instance, but because the pass is working so well, you keep going to it. Jamar Chase looked unstoppable, and that time Marlon just made a good play, and it is a mistake, though, at the end, because Joe threw the interception, whereas I'm sure a lot of people will say that, running the ball could have been the better option there, but that gave the Ravens life in this game, obviously with 3 minutes left. Eventually, they kicked a field goal by Justin Tucker to send it into overtime, but even still, when you see that field goal, you're thinking, all right, this coin toss is going to be huge, because either the Bengals can sort of try and put out this fire, because they had a good drive going, other than the fact that Joe threw that interception, or the Ravens take a full advantage of this momentum and just go down there and score a touchdown. And what we saw in overtime was even crazier, arguably, than what we saw in the game. Baltimore got the ball first, and they were driving pretty fast. They were driving pretty fast down the field with the first possession of overtime, and there was just that one play, right, where a fast snap. I'm not sure if Lamar took his eye off of it or he wasn't expecting it to come that fast or at that time, but he bobbled the snap. It kind of hit off of his chest, and he fumbled it. He fumbled it away, and the Bengals recovered it at their 39-yard line. All Cincinnati needed was a field goal at that point, right? Because it was the second drive of the game, and they got into range as good as they could have. And this is so 1 in a million sort of scenarios, right? We all saw the field goal, I'm sure, if you tuned into this game, how it looks at first when you're watching it live like dang, Evan McPherson missed that badly. That's what I thought. And then you replay it closer and you saw the holder fumble the snap a little bit. He put it down, and then it kind of slipped off of his hand. It just kind of slipped to make it go flat. He tried to pick it up again, but by that time, it threw off all the timing and everything like that, and the kick just went wide left. So the most unpredictable scenario happens for the Bengals, right? You already dodged a bullet by recovering that fumble, right? It almost bails out the interception, but then again, you were this close to winning, and you get a play like that happening, completely deflates the whole team, the entire atmosphere in that stadium, obviously, right? And then we saw the big run by Derrick Henry, 51-plus yards on that run. They were down at around the 15 to 10-yard line, and all Justin Tucker has to do is just basically chip it into the goalpost, and that's the game. That's the game right there, 41-38. The Ravens escape where you're thinking they got the ball first, they should win. They fumble it away. Now the Bengals are going to win, and then they mess up the kick, and the Ravens, get a miracle to happen, and they steal this game. And just looking at some of the takeaways from this, it's a harsh loss. The Bengals have had a lot of tough losses, but this one might be the toughest one, just because I go back to that quote that Joe Burrow said that we talked about when he said that he has to be basically perfect to win this game, and he pretty much was, right? The way that this Ravens defense played against Josh Allen, only allowing 10 points, you're thinking, man, they're going to come in here and really put up a better fight. But Joe Burrow, 5 touchdowns, almost 400 yards. And Rams House 99, redraft full PPR stuff. 10, sorry, I'm reading it. I'm reading it in my head. Redraft full PPR, SF start 8. 10 man, I have 2 offers. First, Mahomes, Bijan, Worthy. 4, Purdy, Ayuk, Mixon, and the other is Mahomes. Shaheed with return yards, Jacoby for Lamar, Andrews, Ridley. Thoughts? This is a lot. I like the first one, honestly. Mahomes, Bijan, and Worthy for Brock Purdy, Ayuk, and Mixon. I'm a really big fan of Mixon. And it's unfortunate that he has been hurt, because the first couple of weeks, I think, he played very, very well. So I really am a fan of him. Not too high on Mahomes, honestly. Their offense is just banged up a lot. Bijan, I expected more, and I think you can get more with Ayuk as well. So I like the first one, obvious. Like I said. Eric Fortis, welcome to the show. Need a t-shirt? I would love one too, honestly. Once I get one, maybe you can get one as well. But just recapping this game here, saying the last few nuggets here that I have on the Ravens and the Bengals. It's a loss, and the Bengals play as perfect as you would have liked them to. At least Joe Burrow did. But I'm not saying that this loss is on him, but you go back to that interception, that missed field goal. It obviously can't happen, right? But it's weird. I think it's really weird how Burrow is in this situation where it always feels like it's the defense's fault a lot of times with these losses. And now it's the special teams costing him, right? Where the defense did enough to kind of get him in a spot to win the game. Now the special teams can't get it together. And now they're costing them plays or games where Joe Burrow plays a very good game again, and it kind of goes all to waste. But it sounds like a cop-out for Joe Burrow, right? Like he can do no wrong. And I'm not trying to say that it's never going to be his fault because, again, he threw that interception, right? Maybe, obviously, thinking back on it, he doesn't become that aggressive or throws that pass to Jamar. He's not exempt from any sort of criticism or anything like that, but I think it's fair to say that most blame always lies somewhere else, where you look at some Cincinnati Bengals fans and they're seeing their quarterback, however way you take it, maybe outperform Lamar based on the stats. And at home, you're driving to kind of ice the game, and it's always something. It always feels like it's something getting in your own way, and it's unfortunate. Obviously, the Bengals are frustrated. Jamar Chase, pretty frustrated after the game as well in his comments. Obviously, Joe as well. And I just think this kind of stems from really like an over-reliance on Joe Burrow a little bit. Because the whole narrative idea of coming into this season where the Bengals was that, if Joe Burrow stays healthy the entire year, they're going to the Super Bowl, right? I think they overcompensated a little bit there, right? Joe Burrow is amazing to have on there, right? He gives you a great chance to beat anybody in the NFL. We saw it against the Chiefs. We've seen it now against the Ravens. But still, he needs something else. He needs a little bit more help from the defense, allowing less than 30 points maybe. That would help. The special teams, right? Like, the one thing you need to go right and execute it perfectly, you fumble the snap there. Obviously, it's not intentional, right? But he needs a bit more from his supporting cast. Jamar plays a great game. T. Higgins plays a great game. And still, there's always something that gets in their way. So I think that's almost like an over-reliance on Joe Burrow in a sense, because just thinking that they have him, maybe they didn't put as much attention on getting another corner opposite of Cam Taylor-Britt. Now Dax Hill is hurt, and who are you going to go to now? The defensive line isn't great. The run defense, not that great either. The passing defense, even with those guys there, isn't amazing either. So all these things, I feel like it was just an over-reliance on Joe to think that he's going to be here, so we're just going to be in the conference championship anyway. Why are we going to go overboard and think that we need these many pieces when we've done it before with just Joe? But, that always can't be the case. The AFC is a super tough conference overall. Now you got Houston in there. The regular teams in there, like the Ravens, obviously the Chiefs, and teams like that. So there's a lot of good competition. There's a lot of parity in the NFL nowadays. So you definitely need a lot more. And that's one thing that kind of came into my head when I was thinking about this game. But Lamar and the Ravens, what more is there to say? They're looking great. Lamar and Derrick Henry, obviously. But that defense still needs a little bit more work. I think they've, I had it down, I'm pretty sure they've allowed like 25-plus points in all their games. Or it's the fourth game that they've allowed 25-plus points with that defense. So, it's gotten them 3 wins more than their losses, but that needs to tighten up a little bit more for me to believe that this is really the Ravens team from last year. So, great game overall, I'm not complaining of what I saw, but still, tough one for the Bengals. I kind of feel bad for them. Being a Steelers fan, almost feel bad for them, but not entirely. But that brings us to our next game that we want to talk about. For as good as a game this was, the Bills and the Texans game was right there with it. We had Josh Allen facing Stephon Diggs again, 2 of the best AFC conference teams just in general at 3-1 apiece. What was going to give? Ultimately, it ended up being a mistake from the sidelines that I thought costed the Bengals or the Bills this game. So we're going to talk about that and what transpired in this game as well when we return in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are jumping right back into the action now, getting to more of these great games that we saw over the weekend. The next one I wanted to discuss on here to start the week was the Bills and the Texans game. Like I mentioned, there was a lot of storylines in this week of the NFL. There was a lot of divisional games with implications. There was a lot of, just big historical teams playing with the Cowboys and the Steelers. And there's this this animosity game a little bit, right, between Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. One of the most anticipated games, I thought, of the entire week by two of the 3-1 teams of the NFL so far, but mainly because of Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, right? It came down to the wire, but ultimately it was Houston that won it 23-20 with a last-second field goal there by Kaimi Fairbairn, making a couple tough kicks, I will say, as well. And also, much like the Steelers, the Bills lose back-to-back games to also now be 3-2 on the year, and Houston goes to 4-1 as well, improving on their record. And the Bills' comeback effort was thwarted, like I said, to kind of tease this segment in. It was thwarted by themselves, right? They got in their own way, I thought, and really, I know it's kind of hard to place it on one event that happened in an entire football game, right? But it really feels almost hard not to do that with just how the coaching and the decision-making was panned out there towards the end. And I'm going to get to that as I go through the segment and talking about the performances, because we had some pretty good performances. And I say pretty good just because when I say very well or really good, I mean trying to include both quarterbacks in here, right? And I think we only got one in this game where, we looked at Lamar and Joe Burrow. Both of those guys had great performances. And while here, it was more so C.J. Stroud kind of pulling the strings a little bit, mostly for the Houston Texans. Stroud on the day, 28 of 38, 331 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. Stephon Diggs on this day had 6 receptions for 82 yards. And Nico Collins, only 2 receptions for 78 yards and had that touchdown in the I want to say in the first quarter, I'm pretty sure. But that ultimately ended up being the last play of his day because he wasn't able to return because of a hamstring injury. So, it was unfortunate because he got off to such a great start. And maybe the Texans win more comfortably if he's in there. We'll never know. But still, they were in good positions to win this game. And then on the other side, not as eye-catching, right? Because Josh Allen had another bad performance, 9 of 30 for 131 yards and 1 touchdown. James Cook on the other side of it, he had 20 carries for 82 rushing yards and a touchdown as well. But the receivers, again, are something to point to, just because last week we saw it against the Ravens in Baltimore. All right, you're in a hostile environment. This is your first real test, right? In the Baltimore Ravens, so you get smoked on the road. Now you have another road game, and you have no Khalil Shakir. For as good as Khalil Shakir is, right, for him to make that big of a difference is it might seem unreasonable for some people, right? Because Khalil Shakir, to some people, they might not have even known who that was, but he is clearly their best receiver, a guy that Josh Allen has a lot of confidence in, and he wasn't able to play in this game. But with that being said, no wide receiver on the Bills had over 2 receptions, and Keon Coleman had only 1 catch the entire day, and it was that long touchdown reception that he had. And then no other receiver had more than 2 receptions at all. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem for as good as James Cook is. it always feels like there's something, right? When you have great performances by your running game from one team, like the Bills do with James Cook, there's the opposite situation where maybe like a team like the Steelers or something has a quote-unquote decent run game, but their passing game is just abysmal, or other teams that I just can't think of right now, but, you get my point. I think it's starting to really show for the Bills now, and not to say that they're done or anything like that, but it is now kind of something to take note of, right? Like, all right, this is back-to-back games now where Josh hasn't looked great. Maybe it's Josh, maybe it's his decision-making, or a lot of people critique him for, just trying to do too much, or maybe just the guys around him aren't getting open as much, or just not really capable yet, or just do it on their own to beat man coverage and go make a tough catch. You got that with Stephon Diggs, obviously, and he's not there. But talking about what happened in the game and getting to that big moment, we look at the first half and how Buffalo had 6 drives in that first half, and only one of them ended up in points, which was a field goal. The rest, the other 5 possessions, were 5 punts by Sam Martin and the Buffalo Bills, while Houston also had not the smoothest of first halves, but they also had a couple field goals in there. But they tacked on 2 touchdowns right out of the gate early on to take command of this game, and then they took that lead into the half, leading 17-3 in what you maybe would have started to believe that it was going to be a pretty easy game for the Houston Texans. But Buffalo, to their credit for the critique I have of them maybe not having the weapons available to mount such a comeback, they did just that in the second half with 2 touchdown drives in their first 2 drives. And while Houston only got a field goal in their first 2 drives, now the score is 17-20. The Bills go on a 14-3 run, and they're within 3 points now, right? Now you're thinking, like, maybe the Bills could pull something like this off. It would really be a big statement win after the showing that they had last week. But then we get also, we get to a point where I have to give credit to the Bills as well for a great job on defense, for producing those 2 turnovers, an interception, and then the following drive, producing a fumble off of CJ Stroud as well. But for as those turnovers go, to only get 3 points out of it is feels like a missed opportunity, right? For as close as this game was, maybe getting some more. Obviously, you won't know how the game ends, but capitalizing on those mistakes, especially when you were down 17-3 in this game at the half, you just got to have those plays. At least that's how I always think as a fan, right? When you lose a game by 3, you always think back to those moments and think how, there needs to be more urgency there, that you need points there. In a game where you were missing a great player, one of your top receivers, and you were down by so much, you need to get something out of that drive. For the Bills to get only 3 points feels like a missed opportunity, but the moment we have to talk about here came when there was 30 seconds left in this game, and the Bills had the ball on their own 3-yard line. It was 20-20 at this point because they got those 3 points, right, like I said, off of the turnovers. They got the ball here. On your 3-yard line, you're thinking with 30 seconds left, you're not going to drive down the field in 30 seconds, right? You're not probably going to get a field goal either. So, with and how most teams would think in that situation, you're not giving up. You're not like just throwing that drive away, but you got to be smart here, right? You're at the 3-yard line. Let's not lose the game here. And the Bills, I don't know if it was on all of their plays or if it was on 1 or 2 of them, but they went into an empty set on their 3-yard line, which, if you don't know what empty set means, it means like the running back, motions out of the backfield, and now they're passing, right? Now you're passing, and the defense isn't left wondering. So that's already kind of questionable. You can kind of let that slide for one play. 30 seconds left. If you really want to be adventurous, one play, see if you can get it, that's fine. For them to throw it 3 times and just all of them be incomplete, mind you. All of them are incomplete passes down the middle, down the left sideline, and somewhere else where I think one other ball went. But still, all incomplete. 30 seconds left in this game, and they only managed to tack off 16 seconds, where if you throw it once and you think, all right, let's just not do this. We still have overtime. Let's run it here, and we could maybe get the ball in the first possession of overtime. But to consistently insist on throwing it 3 different times, you only take off 16 seconds, and you don't gain any yardage moving forward. So Now you have to punt it, right? And you're thinking 16 seconds, maybe that's not so bad. But the Texans only need a field goal, and your punter isn't that far back because he's already pinned back far enough. He's in a congested area already. So you punt it, it doesn't go that far, and with a good return by Robert Woods, the Texans are already basically there. I think with probably 10 seconds to go, they run one more play, and then they call a timeout with like a second or two left. And of course, Kaimi Fairbairn's going to hit that 58, 59-yard field goal, I want to say, on the day. And they end up losing by 3 points to the Houston Texans. And they really didn't have to sweat so much to get that field goal, right? They didn't mount a game-winning field goal, developing drive for them to go into this game. So you almost handed it to them. You didn't throw an interception or anything like that, but you basically made it as easy as you could have by just throwing the ball, stopping the clock, and not having them use their timeouts or anything like that. And it was just, I've never seen anything like that, really inexplicable by Sean McDermott, who owned up to it, to be fair, but still, no idea what the reasoning was behind that. It's extremely risky and unlikely that you get near a field goal there with 30 seconds left starting on your own 3-yard line. And you almost, to me, you throw away that great defensive performance by, obviously, your defense, right? Intercepting C.J. Stroud, strip sacking him as well, and getting those 3 points to tie the game. To make a decision like that, you're almost undervaluing what your defense did, and I can't understand why that was the decision made there. In games like this where the margin is so slim, the situations, the decisions that go into these games, situational type of football, all of that matters, right? What you do to end the half, what you do to end the game, what you do on fourth down calls, how do you execute it? Are you disciplined enough to not get a lot of penalties? The Bills did a pretty good job of all of that, even with a poor offensive performance. And for you to make that play at the end, again, I don't really understand it. It's a game that you probably shouldn't have really been in, honestly, but you were there, and then you kind of threw it away. That's what's really disappointing of this entire thing, I thought. And you look at Josh Allen, he's going to be the story, or one of the main ones, just because he was 30% completion percentage for Josh Allen in back-to-back games where the offense and himself have not really been able to turn the production on. Compared to the first 3 weeks, the last two haven't really been there, so that's a little bit concerning. But credit to Houston's defense, obviously, for pressuring Allen a lot and the coverage that they had on their receivers, but still, it feels like a missed opportunity for the Bills. And to me, just here on the Texans, just to close it out, I am just even more encouraged when Joe Mixon comes back. They're able to be 4-1 right now, but for as good as they look, and C.J. Stroud just putting up 300-yard performances like it's nothing, when Joe Mixon comes back and they're able to run the ball like they did in the first 2 weeks, with Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins looking like a bona fide wide receiver one, and Tank Dell still as well, they're going to be a massive problem, especially in the AFC where it's really only, it looks like, the Ravens. For the Texans, they'll be able to run the ball like they have and pass it whenever they want to. That's going to be scary. And for them to be 4-1 now, when Joe Mixon comes back, watch out, because they're going to be very, very good. And they're still very young, so they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to grow off of that as well. So the Texans get a much-needed win, but the Bills, I'm sure, are lamenting those decisions that they made at the end of the game. But speaking of games, obviously the one coming up tonight, Monday Night Football, the Saints taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to preview that after this break, talking about the matchups, my predictions, and the injury news leading up into the kickoff at 8:15. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back in just a few moments.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get a break from recapping the games yesterday, and we're going to look to tonight with the last game of Week 5 in the NFL, previewing the Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs matchup on Monday Night Football. We're back to the single Monday Night Football game tonight as the Saints travel to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, and I'm getting some news, obviously, related to the Kansas City Chiefs, of course. The Chiefs wide receiver, Rashee Rice, is expected to miss the remainder of the 2024 season as he needs his LCL to be repaired. So, there you have it. Rashee Rice, we've been speculating from last week on what the diagnosis was going to be, and it's funny enough how it came at this moment when I'm going to preview this game. But, yeah, he's expected to miss the remainder of the 2024 season, trying to repair, having surgery on his LCL and trying to repair that. So it's a big bummer, a big loss for the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously. We sort of thought that could be the worst case scenario, right, because of how bad the injury looked. But now we got that confirmation, and it's a big loss, obviously, for the Chiefs, right, to lose their number one in a spot where I felt like he was really starting to be molded into this go-to guy, scheming him open for the Kansas City Chiefs. But, yeah, a big loss nonetheless. So, looking at this game now a little bit more, the Chiefs are still 4-0. They're one of two teams that remains undefeated, and now the Vikings have already won their game. So, we'll see if the Chiefs are able to stay undefeated, while the New Orleans Saints, coming off of back-to-back losses to their division rivals, the Falcons, and in a close one to the Eagles. So, there's a lot riding on this game pretty much. You know, the Saints trying to stay in that division race, and the Chiefs trying to not give up any ground, knowing that, you know, Rashee Rice isn't coming back. Hollywood Brown's probably not coming back during the regular season. Pacheco, same thing. They need to rack up as many wins, right, for any moment where they might hit a bad run of games. They won these games at the beginning of the year, so that's going to be important. And talking about the Saints now, going back to them, looking at some of the injury news for them heading into this game. The inactives so far for the Saints officially heading into tonight's game is going to be Pete Werner. Their linebacker is going to be inactive tonight. Peyton Turner, another defensive end, will be also not playing. Cesar Ruiz, one of their offensive guards, is out of this game. Taysom Hill is also out of this game as well. And you look at the original diagnosis of this game, it was only really Pete Werner, their linebacker, who was questionable. Everybody else was already ruled out for the game days before, obviously tonight. So big losses for the Saints already from the offensive side and the defensive side as well. Also, their linebacker Willie Gay is not going to be playing as well. The former Chiefs player is not going to face his former team. And now, looking at the Saints, right, they have we've seen two sides of the spectrum with them. You know, the first 2 weeks, perfect. Destroying the Panthers and then destroying the Cowboys in week 2. They're looking like a serious threat. You know, Clint Kubiak is the talk of the town. Alvin Kamara is looking like the second best running back in the NFL. Derek Carr, a revival of his career and things like that. It's all looking great. And then you get the last 2 weeks where the offense kind of gets stifled against the Eagles. You give up some big moments and big plays to the Atlanta Falcons where you feel sick of giving up that game and losing a divisional game as well on top of that. So it's been the highest of highs to start and then the lowest of lows in the last 2 games now. But after especially those first 2 wins came with a combined score of 91-29, the NFL could really humble you in just week to week, right? You get such a great performance in the first 2, and then you come back, and it's quite the opposite. So now you're dealing with the injuries as well. It could be pretty tough, right? And I think going back to those games and what we can learn from it about the Saints is that in some of those moments where it could lead to bad decisions and missed opportunities, like we talked about with the Eagles, right? going for it on fourth down where you kick a field goal and maybe you don't lose by 3 points, or other situations. I forget exactly what they were, but I know I talked about a couple of them in that game that I'm sure they're going to want to have back. And then last week against the Falcons, going more into specifics, it was a just back-breaking pass interference call against them to just set up Atlanta very nicely to kick that game-winning field goal. And it's moments like that where you think like a call like that, you want to blame it on the refs or anything like that. It's really just like, you know what you're supposed to do and not do in those moments, and to kind of risk it on that pass interference call and take that gamble. That I feel like that's more on the Saints than it is on the ref making a call like that or something like that. So, those are moments where I think you really start to see the difference from a very, very good team, experienced and savvy team, and then you get the Saints where they're good. They have all the pieces, it seems like, but when it comes to these big moments, you kind of need to be there to take something from it and know what to do in those exact moments. And I feel like the Ravens haven't been there, so we've seen some of these losses now with their performances. And now looking at the Chiefs and their injuries that they have to deal with, obviously we just got that update on Rashee Rice, but elsewhere, looking at their inactives for tonight, there's going to be no Carson Thomas, their defensive end, no C.J. Hansen, one of their guards, or Marlon, their defensive tackle, Marlon, as well. And they weren't dealing with too many big injuries coming into this game, other than the fact maybe some guys were a little bit questionable, but still the biggest ones remain. And the biggest, I think, what if or biggest answer we still need to have for this game is, what is this offense going to be without Rashee, without Pacheco, and without Hollywood Brown? All of those guys that they pretty much brought in this year outside of Pacheco and Rashee Rice, what are they going to be like now? What is Xavier Worthy going to look like now, really taking up a lot of that responsibility and things like that? Carson Steele, another young guy, what is he going to bring to the table? Is Travis Kelce going to continue to put on these performances, or is he maybe going to be up and down as well? It's very interesting where they stand, and it's huge that they're 4-0 right now, because if they would have lost to like the Chargers or the Falcons or something like that, it could get very, very worrying, right? With this unknown that you have at these positions. So, they've been in a lot of close games, and unlike the Saints, where they might have faltered in some decisions or plays that were there or that weren't there that they tried to make. The difference with the Chiefs is you look at their 4 wins as well, and they've been in all close games as well. You look at the nail-biter with the Ravens, the last-second field goal win against Cincinnati, the big fourth down stop in Atlanta as well, and then last week overcoming a 10-point deficit to beat the Chargers. Where the Saints kind of failed at in those moments, the Chiefs have done it 4 different times and have always just been there in the end. They always come out on top, it seems, and that's where I think you really see some of the difference between the Chiefs being in these tight moments, despite all these injuries, right? It just feels like they know what to do with Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, and all these guys. It's a big difference, right? You might look at this team and think like, wow, they're all injured. How do they keep pulling away with these wins? When you're talking about the expertise, being there in those moments and knowing what to do and how to feel like, it ends up being the difference. And they've been able to get more out of Travis Kelce now, and their defense is playing very good in general, but in those big moments, it always feels like they come out on top as well. So when you have that and Patrick Mahomes, a lot of these games are going to swing in your favor. But against the New Orleans Saints now, I'm looking at some interesting matchups that are going to determine this game, starting off with Chris Jones going up against that injured interior offensive line for the Saints, right? No Cesar Ruiz, no Eric McCoy as well. The backers are gonna have a handful with Chris Jones, obviously, and now also looking at this injured Saints defense, Travis Kelce, how successful is he gonna be going up against a injured linebacking room as well? Tyrann Mathieu, how much does he see of him, and how much do they try to move him around and move into different areas to affect their game plan? That's going to be interesting to see how both of those guys are deployed in this game. And just some questions I have about this game. Can the Saints establish the run, much like you look at the other performances by other running backs against the Chiefs? Derrick Henry, Zach Moss, Bijan Robinson, and J.K. Dobbins all combined had 55 carries and only managed to rack up 143 rushing yards on this Chiefs defense. So now, can they get that going with no Eric McCoy, with no Cesar Ruiz? That's going to be a big swing point as well. Can the Chiefs get production in their passing game? The running game might be all right, but can they make big passes when they need it on 3rd and long, on 2nd and long, and count on guys like Noah Gray, Xavier Worthy, and guys like this to make plays? That's going to be a difference maker as well, I believe. And, going back to those decision-making moments, right? The 4th downs, the time managements, the turnover battles as well. I feel like the Saints are going to be in this game, and it's going to come down to those moments to make the difference between a win and a loss. So I'm really interested to see how that pans out. But my prediction, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I feel like those offensive line injuries, Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy especially, are big, especially because Clint Kubiak, we talked about the zone runs and setting up the play action off of that. If you don't really have production like that from your offensive line and Chris Jones just being in there messing everything up, I think it's going to put you behind the chains. Then I expect Steve Spagnuolo to blitz the heck out of Derek Carr and just get in his face. I feel like it's going to be too much if the running game's not there, with the offensive lineman being out and not having the most outlandish receivers, right? Rashid Shaheed is nice. Chris Olave is very good, but I feel like you're going to need more, and I feel like they're just too injured. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs. They stay perfect to match the Minnesota Vikings, and that'll wrap up Week 5. But we have one more topic to get to. I have to make sure I mention this weird story that developed last week. Thursday to Friday, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, Romeo Doubs, was not present at practice, and now it appears that we know why and how, and what does that mean going forward for the trade deadline involving Romeo Doubs and the Packers. All of that is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. And this one is a story that developed over the last couple of days last week where, we're talking about the preview to Week 5. And I didn't see this report until Saturday when I think it really started to gain more traction. It's a pretty peculiar story that developed towards the end of last week in Green Bay. According to initial reports from Sports Illustrated, Green Bay Packers wide receiver Romeo Doubs was absent from practice on Thursday and Friday because of what the team said was personal reasons, right? Not really an injury, just personal reasons, right? You're thinking, all right, not too much of it. You might see it, you might not see it. It doesn't really matter. But he was listed as doubtful for yesterday's game where they ultimately ended up winning against the Rams, but he didn't play. You might think because he was doubtful, they just decided, all right, let's not play him for personal reasons. He didn't make practice. It's fine. He's not going to make the game. He'll miss this game, right? But before that, Green Bay Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst announced that they would suspend Romeo Doubs for this game. He announced that on Saturday, and you're thinking, like, what? Like, why would you suspend him? What's the reason? I thought it was personal reasons, right? Reports came out that claimed that he was not at practice because he was unhappy with his opportunities in the run game, according to a report by Sports Illustrated, that he was unhappy with just the targets, the opportunities that he was getting in the passing game recently, right? And I didn't think this was too big a deal, honestly. I mean, I haven't been paying too much attention to the Packers, but then I started looking at it a little bit more. Romeo Doubs so far for Green Bay, he started all 4 games. He's played the most snaps of any wide receiver so far. He's been targeted 20 times, which is slightly less on a per game basis than last year. And but when Jordan Love plays, he had 7 targets in game 1 and he had 8 targets in week 4. And Romeo Doubs so far through the year, he's had 12 receptions on 20 targets, which are both second on the team for wide receivers. So it's not like he's last or anything like that. It's not like he has like 5 catches on like 10 targets or something like that. It's been like all right to be second on the year. And I think a big part of this has to go to the fact that Jordan Love missed 2 games. So maybe Malik Willis, for being a backup quarterback, just getting there like 4 weeks ago now, not making it too much of an emphasis to get Romeo Doubs the ball, but just trying not to make a mistake and go as the offense goes and just take what the defense gives you, right? Not necessarily trying to get the ball to Romeo Doubs, which is one of their best receivers, obviously, but with Malik Willis in there, I don't think it's much about getting Romeo the ball as much as it is just trying not to mess up and lose the game. And it's not like anyone's fault or anything like that. It's not Malik's fault, right? He's just trying not to mess up and trying to get the ball, forcing it to Romeo Doubs might have been, mistake driven, and then you have a bigger problem, right? You're losing. Maybe you lose both of those games, right? Trying to do that. And now you stand at a completely different position than you would have been if you just stuck to the game plan. And that's what Malik Willis did. So it is just weird, right? Because you see this, and maybe it's because, because against Minnesota, he was third behind Dontavius Wicks with 13 targets and Tucker Kraft with 9 targets. Maybe he felt in that game against the Vikings with the, with the idea that they could come back into that game, and the fact that he was third on the team with 8 targets, wanting to be a part of this comeback, thinking that he should be more involved. Maybe he felt a little upset by that Dontavius Wicks got 13 targets over him. Tucker Kraft got 9 over him. He maybe wanted to contribute more than just the 8 targets, and he was frustrated by that. That could be something else that I thought of. But going to Brian Gutekunst's message and his announcement on this suspension, it all but confirms that it was something related to this, because some people might think that it's just a wild report. It doesn't really hold any weight. But with what Brian Gutekunst said in this statement, and he said, unfortunately, we had to make the difficult decision to suspend Romeo for this week's game, meaning yesterday. His decision and actions during the week negatively impacted the team and required us to take this action. While we are certainly disappointed, we are confident that we will be able to move forward in a positive manner. So it's not like this was just something that Romeo did in practice or did in the building or something like that. I feel like this all but confirms that it was something along the lines of Romeo not being happy with this team and his opportunities and things like that, like they said. So I feel like it does hold some weight, this report. And it's weird because, like I said, it's weird because Romeo, it's not like he's being completely ignored, but also just connecting it to the trade rumors we talked about. I had to bring it in here because we talked about Amari Cooper and we talked about DeAndre Hopkins potentially being trade targets. Obviously, with Devontae Adams being out there, he's going to go to a team like the Jets or the Saints, obviously, right? And there's still other guys out there that I know I talked about, like John Mechie. He hasn't been really used that much by the Houston Texans. He's another one. Now you have Romeo Doubs being included in here as well. I saw a report that the Panthers might cash in on Deontay Johnson if the season, the next couple of weeks before the trade deadline, doesn't really turn out like they think it would. They might think of cashing in on him as well. And I think you now have to add Romeo Doubs into this conversation because I feel like something like this doesn't completely just, wash away with just a conversation or things like that. For a receiver, I think to kind of really get over this, I think they need to see the ball come more their way. And they could get the ball to him over the next couple of weeks more. But I don't know. It just feels like it's there's more substance in this situation that I feel like this could develop into something where teams start calling about Romeo Doubs, and I don't think it would be uncalled for or anything like that because of the fact that, we have this situation now. And on one side, you look at Green Bay, they just have a lot of guys. They have Dontavius Wicks, obviously, Christian Watson when he comes back, Jalen Reed is looking like a great receiver, obviously. Romeo Doubs included in there as well. Now you have Tucker Kraft at the tight end spot and Josh Jacobs as well. You have 6 guys right there that need to get the ball a good amount. And it's not always going to fall to Romeo Doubs. And I don't know if he's trying to be the out-and-out number one. But, it's not a great thing to do, obviously, in practice to miss things like this. But I feel like when you have a lot of guys like this and you need more of the ball, like the report says that he's unhappy about it, I feel like now heading into this weird period now with the trade deadline like 3 or 4 weeks away, it could develop into something. I really do. And guys, want to be more of the focal point in some offenses. It's hard to please everyone, obviously, right, when you have 5 other guys that need the ball. But the next week or so is going to be important because Jordan Love is obviously back. He didn't play with Romeo this week because he was suspended. But now getting back into hopefully the groove of this thing, having Romeo Doubs there. Jordan Love didn't look too great yesterday, but maybe that's because Romeo Doubs isn't there, and that's a safety blanket for Jordan Love to throw the ball to. Over the next week or so, if this doesn't improve, I think it's going to gain even more traction than it kind of already has, but I feel like it's definitely a warm topic to kind of monitor as we go through the trade deadline, and it's right now, I think it's just too one-sided to really know for a fact. I'm really interested to see what Romeo Doubs has to say about this situation, but she's going to be very highly sought after by a lot of teams, right? The Steelers jump out right away. You look at the Washington Commanders, another team, the Saints, the Jets, all these teams that are being involved, the Bills also, especially after those 2 back-to-back performances. Guys like Romeo, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari, Deontay Johnson, John Mechie, all these guys, I think we're going to see maybe like 2 of these guys move, I feel like. 2 of these guys plus Devontae Adams, I feel like. Just because where the Titans are, where the Browns are especially, I think something needs to happen for them. Those guys don't do any good on those rosters anyway, so you might as well get something out of it, especially if you're Amari or DeAndre Hopkins, who are on the last years of their deals. But also Darius Slayton is another one as well. So it could be a situation where we have a couple guys moving, and I had to include Romeo Doubs in there because of this story that kind of developed just out of nowhere, and it's really interesting. Being a Steelers fan, I would love for them to get someone like Romeo Doubs or anybody, honestly, outside of just George Pickens, and hopefully the Steelers, missed out on Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. I don't think they're getting Devontae Adams. I feel like one of these other guys, like Romeo Doubs, John Mechie, or DeAndre Johnson, that would be funny. Darius Slayton would definitely help out right now, but it all goes along the lines with Romeo Doubs now being added to that group. It could get pretty interesting over the next couple weeks, so we'll keep an eye on that. But that's going to do it for today's show. That'll wrap it up for all the topics I had on hand. Thank you guys for joining me on today's show. Make sure to check out more of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast on both YouTube networks, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel, to catch more content around the NFL in a variety of different ways. Make sure to follow the network on all forms of social media, and remember to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more live episodes each and every weekday with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys again for joining me. Go watch the Monday Night Football game. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss everything that happened in that game.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn.